So now let's get into our first panel of the day. This panel will be discussing the major humanitarian players, so I'd like to invite some major humanitarian players to the stage. First of all, Dr. Kerim Kinik, please, if you'll join me, the president, of course, of the Turkish Red Crescent and the vice president of the IFRC. Yes, round of applause are always necessary. Next, Katie Atfield, the deputy head of division operations and partnership and coordination at the ICRC. Katie, welcome. Thank you very much. Take a seat. And last but by no means least, Meta Peterson, the head of office for Turkey for the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Society. Meta, thank you so much. Take a seat. Okay. Gentlemen, ladies, we've heard some opening statements from yourself, Dr. Kinnick, and from Nicholas. I think we're going to dive straight into this and try and dig down into exactly what it is that the humanitarian sector is going to look like for years to come. And Meta, I want to start with you. Where do you see the sector going in the next 10, 50, 100 years?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, I think that we already had the key speaker talking about the importance of the ecosystems, of the local action. I think that's really one of the big focuses we need to move towards, away from a top-down, really looking at how can we strengthen the local actors. I think we were thinking, I mean, there was allusion to the World Humanitarian Summit where the focus was very much on improving the effectiveness and the efficiency of the humanitarian actors. And there, I think the key actor is the local actor. So how do we strengthen them? And I think, again, the work of Kızılay working here in Turkey is a very good example of having a very strong actor improves the effectiveness and the efficiency of the humanitarian action.
Katie, would you like to pick up, or would you like to move on and give your sense of where the humanitarian sector goes from here?
Yeah, I fully agree with that, of course. I think it's absolutely overdue that the system becomes a great deal more diverse, becomes properly suited to the new demands on it. We know that the humanitarian needs are not diminishing. Unfortunately, there are many, many people in need, and as an ecosystem, we have that flexibility to make sure that we can try to always be in the right place at the right time. The situation around us, whether it is to do with armed conflicts and wars, as we as ICRC face, or whether it's other types of crisis, become, we have a complex world, so we need complex and sophisticated solutions to that, and I think we're moving in very much that direction in a really good way. And at the same time, we need, as a movement and as a humanitarian system, to retain what makes us what we are, which is our principles, which is our very special approach to humanity, which looks at the needs of the population rather than any other agenda. And I think that balance of change, but also staying true to our roots, that's where we're strong.
Absolutely. A quick programming note. Dr. Kinnick will be responding in Turkish, so helps all you guys. Doesn't help me very much because my Turkish is terrible.
I can carry on in English.
Not entirely.
Yeah.
Whatever you're most comfortable, Doctor. Picking up on that, we mentioned the localization. Nicholas mentioned the local factors here. This is a region that is under immense pressure humanitarianly. How do you see the progress going forward, and what can organizations like the IFRC, like the Red Crescent, like the Red Cross do in the next few years?
To be honest, this ecosystem of the humanitarian landscape doesn't fit for the meet the humanitarian expectation nowadays. So we have to enlarge our ecosystem because we have been stuck in pure humanitarian business, but unfortunately, armed conflicts carrying on. 40 active armed conflicts in the world, and 30,000 people becoming everyday refugee, and development streams in UN level, in governmental level, separated from the humanitarian sectors. The security layer absolutely far away from the humanitarian sectors, and the only 5 permanent delegates also have right to decide the future of humanity. So it's not fair. So we have to enlarge our ecosystem throughout this, the development stream and the security system and the humanitarian actors. For us, the biggest challenges is actually the governments and the societies spending 1.7 trillion US dollar for defense sector. It means the killing people. But less than 100 billion US dollars whole humanitarian also budget. It is really unfair and it is really strange. So for making most efficient and effective advocacy, we have to also call private sector, academia to our ecosystem. So we have to enlarge our ecosystem politics, membership organizations, not only pure focus on the humanitarian, issues, but from the media. So the ecosystem must be large than our existing one.
And that sense of enlarging the ecosystem is, of course, a noble aim. That's what we'll all want in this room. But as we all well know, exponentially, crises are getting worse. There's more trouble in the world, and people are perhaps giving less. So how do those two things come together? How do they fit in, the enlarging of the ecosystem and yet perhaps less funding for that larger ecosystem? Anyone want to pick up on that?
I certainly think it's very important that we engage with actors and enlarge the ecosystem. But I think it's very important that we also keep very clear in mind what is the value added of the various actors coming in. And I think we owe it to the beneficiaries and the people we're trying to reach and support to make sure that whatever we do is as effective and efficient as possible. We know that there are many actors running around. We have, for example, also the military increasingly playing a role in the humanitarian sector. Is that an actor we want to bring in? I think in big earthquakes, the military does have a role. They have the machinery, the helicopters to bring people forth. But we need to be very clear on how do we define the various roles of the people coming in and the different agencies coming in to make sure that they have a value added and that they're also cost effective. We know that the military can do certain things, but in other instances they're very expensive. So all of these things, yes, we need to make it bigger and bring more partners in, but we really need, and I come back to my opening statement, is the local actors. We need to really make sure that it's effective and cost efficient. And it's not only a question of is it cost effective that we are the cheapest, but it's also are we bringing quality support. So I think all of these equations they're difficult questions, because how do you make sure that that we are providing aid in a dignified way? Is this what the people really need? So all of these things are very important. We need to open up, but there are many things that we need to see. How do we bring different agencies into the club?
And one thought that comes to mind there is, how do we judge the efficacy of these local actors? There's always a sense that if you perhaps can save one child or save a family, is that an effective use of time? How do you think that we can judge the efficacy of local actors? And is there a sense that audits perhaps of local actors, checking on local actors, needs to be far more rigorous?
It's for the people affected to tell us whether it's effective. I mean, that's the key audience here. I mean, I think that we, as a system or an ecosystem, are only now really getting used to the idea that our primary accountability is to those people, while of course remaining fully accountable to the people who give us the resources to give. So that's a balance. But I think in terms of the efficiency, the efficacy, people will, once they have the confidence in us as a genuine humanitarian effort, then people will have the confidence to tell us whether things are right or wrong, whether their holistic needs are being met. And that's one of the most important sides. Of course, again, we can also balance that with the absolute need to make sure that governments, states, those in authority are fully aware what their responsibilities are, because I think the ecosystem, no matter how strong it is, mustn't substitute for the basic responsibilities of states to look after their citizens, to ensure that people's needs are met, to make sure that people's rights are not abused. So again, it's a balance, and of course one of the roles of the ICRC is to talk confidentially to governments that in order to try and make sure that they are in a position to make sure that those affected by armed conflicts have the best possible chance to be protected and to have their lives and livelihoods and dignity respected.
Absolutely. Dr. Koenig, just sort of lay out for us how delicate that balance is, because I'm sure all of us here will be cognizant of the fact that recently we've had a huge withdrawal of aid from the United States to the UN Refugee Agency in Palestine, that purely political decision made by the Trump administration. So how delicate is that balance between the aid that organizations like yourselves want to give and making sure that the political bosses are happy with where that aid's going?
That is the biggest, the challenges just we are facing as the humanitarian actors, sustainable humanitarian financing. We as national societies and the Red Movement mainly depend on the private individual donor stream. So thanks for our, the donors. They are providing us and enabling us and to provide more services to the vulnerable people. But that pattern and the mechanism of the financing our projects and the programs from the private individual donors is not suitable for mid-term and long-term planning. So always we depend on the crisis, disasters, and
so when there's a crisis, disaster, people open their wallets, they give a lot, a certain amount of time, but that is finite, it runs out eventually.
Yes, but we need for long-term and mid-term planning, sustainable and long-term financial mechanism. And UN system as well also suffering because of long-term financing. The government's contributing to that pool, but unfortunately it's still very short-term, 1 year. The consolidated appeal programs just for 1 year. We need to extend these the programs for making mid-term and long-term the planning. And of course, we have traditional ways for collecting the donations, but we have to enrich the streams from the new media, the social media, from the private sector by the social responsibility the programs, and from the finance sector and the different resources and self-sufficient systems like we did. The Kızılay is a kind of Islamic Vakıf, Islamic foundation. So we have income-generating businesses, companies, real estates. So we can generate our own income. Thanks our donors and the founders, actually, it sustained the suitable and sustainable the planning for us. But we have to transfer this know-how to other fraternal national societies, but their own governments legislate some regulations for providing sustainable environment for their own national societies and their own NGOs.
Just this last point then on the link between governments and humanitarian organizations. How many of you are confident that we're going to see an increased investment across the globe from governments to humanitarian organizations? I mentioned the example of Donald Trump. Perhaps that's an anomaly, and in a couple of years' time that won't matter. But are we seeing a trend of people reducing the amount of money governments want to give to societies like yours?
I think that maybe not a reduction, but as we're saying, the humanitarian needs are going up, and even if you keep it at the same level, we would still be falling short. But I think the problem with the international donors and the governments is that they have their political agenda. So the money that comes, and I totally agree with Dr. Kinnick and his assessment saying that we really need some longer term, medium term financing to be able to really address the problems, is that a lot of the money that comes in internationally is earmarked and has a certain political agenda. Whether it's being, we know that now, of course, with the refugee crisis, we see a lot of European governments directing their funding towards keeping the refugees in the area around where they have fled from. So really investing, taking the money from the more development longer term and putting it into the sort of refugee responsing and supporting the refugees away from Europe. So we're seeing increasingly that a lot of the international funding has those kind of agendas. And that's why the domestic fundraising is so important, because that gives the organizations like Kızılay and other organizations the independence to actually have the financial ability to really go in where the needs are. So I do think that we need to look at these new that the changes in the international funding, we need to be less dependent on it. We need to, and we know that International Federation, we are very much focused on local fundraising and making the organizations in Turkey, in Kenya, wherever they are, more self-sufficient in terms of funding that doesn't come with this political agenda. So I think that's a very important, whether it goes up or down, I think this independence on non-earmarking is a very important one.
Do you want to pick up on that, Dr. Kinnick, Katie?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I couldn't agree more. But I think, we do also need, we want to maintain a distance between our goals and the objectives of governments in other senses. Is that going to remain possible? I think that's one of the senses of your question. This move towards, we saw. Maybe in the last few decades, we've seen a strong sense of, perhaps a lot of resource needs to be given for the common good, for the good of the victims of this type of environment. Is that going to survive? Are we seeing now, is this just a short-term thing, or is it something that looks like more a longer-term trend? I think we need to be prepared for the latter. We need to be aware that maybe for the foreseeable future, we're not going to be able to rely on large amounts of funding that is completely unearmarked. So we need to make sure that our accountability is solid enough that we can enjoy at least a level of trust, and that we can remain true to our basic character as a humanitarian ecosystem, that we don't become part of the political agenda. I think there's a difference. Of course our donors have political agenda, they're governments. But that doesn't have to mean that we become part of that agenda, that we follow that, or that people even perceive that. I think we need to very much focus on that. But yes, let's not be naive. Things are becoming less normative, and everybody wants to see a return on their investment. So if money comes, it means, well, what's it going to do for me and my family? What's it going to do for my security in the future? As much as, well, I want to help the people over there.
Well, moving away from those larger actors for now, Nicholas mentioned something in his keynote that struck out to me, chaos versus coordination. I think this kind of ties in with what you've been saying, Meta, about the localization. If humanitarian actors start being more locally based, so they start giving money directly, is there a risk that that money will not get exactly to where it's meant to be? And how do you kind of weigh those two actors, that money given directly via, I don't know, mobile phone transfer or whatever it is in the future? How do you ensure that that money does go to who it's intended for?
Actually, we are, as humanitarian actors, the world citizens, the beyond flags and the beyond and the states. We have to reach every vulnerable people, entire world. But we have to act in a frame of the international, the legislations, laws, and the regulations, yes. But the states or the intergovernmental organizations or international organizations who are controlling, for example, the money transfer system, they are applying some blockage for our transferring money.
And a
For
charge,
example,
perhaps.
yes. For example, we have a SWIFT system, IBAN system, Western Union system. We have to transfer money for elevating human suffering in Darfur. I have to send my US dollar, my own dollar. It's not the Trump's dollar, my dollar, because I earn it, to Khartoum. But some hands stop my transition. Why? Because I have to check the safety, security, some things. But I have to clarify the transition. But I'm a humanitarian actor. Sudan Red Crescent is humanitarian actor. It's transition between two eminent humanitarian actors. But they are able to stop my action. Or European Commission. Thanks them. So they are supporting us. For assisting refugees in Turkey. But we are trying to negotiate with our colleagues in European Union to extend our efforts cross-borderly, because there are 5 million IDPs suffering inside Syria, in the northern part of Syria, who are not able to receive from any, different organizations because of the armed conflicts and the de facto problems, but because of the red tape, the bureaucratic rules, European Commission doesn't allow us to provide by that fund humanitarian assistance to that IDPs inside Syria. So yes, these transitions must be traceable, transparent, and accountable, yes, but not only from one way to other way, strictly. So multiple way, so we can create, we offered during the World Humanitarian Summit an humanitarian money transfer system. So that allow us free, the safe zone for transferring money, but the system that reformed in 2005, UN system, yes, we have cluster approach. We have coordination mechanism, and we have fair and sustainable financial mechanism. But the big size NGOs still bingos, the small size still smalls. There is no mechanism for empowerment of the local actors, the local national societies, for getting bigger. So we have to revise and think on how we will change this.
But is that on you big actors to empower the smaller organizations, to allow them to get bigger, to have a diversity, as Nicholas mentioned, of actors out there? Katie?
Well, yes, I guess so, and the logical conclusion to that is that as organizations get smaller and smaller, eventually they're not organizations at all, they're people to people. And I think that is definitely one of the futures of how things are going to go. It's that people are going to be able to just directly access what they need without so many of the intermediaries. And it's what Meta was saying about efficiency. You know, the fewer intermediaries we have, the more efficient things tend to be. But of course, that then has to be balanced by the need to try to make absolutely sure where money is going. But an individual can give money to another individual. Whether that, is that accountable, is that subject to the same rigors of accountability as anything else? I don't know. We will see, won't we? I mean, remittances go around the world for all sorts of purposes. At huge, vast amounts of money are transferred in that way. And a lot of that money effectively is humanitarian money, because it will go to a poor family from someone who's working somewhere else, and it will help them fulfill their needs. So long as it fulfills their needs, so long as it's designed to actually help them and to survive or to recover from the impact of whatever the crisis is, and so long as that money is not based on the fact that they only support one side of a conflict, or it's only about one thing or another, that's kind of the point. And maybe, yes, maybe we should be willing to get out of the way when it's appropriate.
Mette, sorry, please.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to comment. I think one of the things that we're seeing that's changing a lot in the world is that we're also increasingly saying we would like to do cash transfer rather than handing out blankets, handing out hygiene kits or whatever it is. Of course, if the markets are working and so on, we need to do an analysis. And I think that the cash transfer, which also gives more dignity to people because they're getting money, they can decide themselves what are their needs rather than agencies coming in. I think that's an important sort of development that we need to, and we can see that in Turkey, how well that is working and how it is really empowering the Syrian population who are getting this money to be able to decide themselves how they are using, and through the great work of Kızılay here in Turkey are really showing, you know, how this can be done in a much more efficient way. But having said that, you know, mobile to mobile, I think we have to be careful because there is still a role for accountability to make sure that we are reaching the most vulnerable. So I think we need to reduce the layers from the donor to the beneficiary, but there still is, and that comes back to me saying we need to prove our value added. So whoever is in the stages between from the donor to the, we need to be much better at proving our value added. What if we are getting the money as the International Federation, giving it to Turkish Red Crescent, who then gives it to the beneficiaries? What is our value added? Why do we have to be there? This is what we need to be better at, and also communicating to the donor, saying this is our value added, and to the European taxpayer, whoever is behind giving this money. So I think that this is we need to be more accountable, and we need to show that we are more efficient. And I think the cash programming and what is being done here in Turkey is really showing the way on, you know, how do we in the future work much more through the cash programming, bringing it to scale. I think back, if we had in the tsunami time, if we had these large cash program, I think we probably would have been much more efficient. And so I think this is the way we're working and are moving towards, and I think it's in the right way.
Okay, we're coming towards the end of the discussion. Yeah. The numbers have changed colour. We have one more question though, and I want, well, kind of two questions, but for each of you, and I'm going to pick Katie to go first. I would like you to try and tell us, I'm going to put you on the spot now and you're going to hate me, one thing you would change about your organisation and one thing that you're absolutely proud of, and you have to all answer something differently. One thing you would change about each of your organisations and one thing you're totally proud of. Katie.
Okay, one thing I would change about the ICRC, probably, you know, we need to be much more connected. We have a role which has left us feeling sometimes that we require to be a little bit distant from other parts of the ecosystem, which is based on a certain number of truths. However, I think we are realizing that we also can benefit enormously from being very much better connected to other parts of the system, we've always, of course, put the people affected in the center. That's the whole point of international humanitarian law. But to make sure that that's reinforced and definitely to be better at working in partnerships, which was one of the themes that came up in terms of this ecosystem of ours, you know. So that kind of connectivity, I think, is absolutely correct. The thing I'm probably most proud of, again, I suppose it's not a very imaginative or revolutionary answer, but it's about the way that we as a movement are so based on certain sort of inalienable principles in terms of seeing that if we are, as an organisation, the trusted one to stand between different parties to a conflict, and nobody else can be there because nobody else is seen as being able to represent something that is not one side, no side. I mean, hundreds of non-state armed groups around the world, as well as pretty much every government in the world, does have a basic trust in the ICRC to be able to fulfill that function. Of course, it's constantly under threat, and we have to be doing the best we can on it. But that's something to be proud of, I think.
Beautifully put. I'm sorry to put you two on the spot now, Dr. Kinnick. One thing you would like to change, and one thing you're immensely proud of.
In our priority list is to shift humanitarian aid method from the humanitarian, the aid delivery to people, the social aid, to the social business. So yes, we have to give fish people in case of emergencies, disasters, because they need for the short term basic humanitarian assistance. But what about mid-term and long-term? We have to teach people, we have to train for hunting the fish. So now we are allocating certain amount of money from our budget for social businesses, for microcredit, for microfinancing, for livelihood, and creating value chain from a beneficiary to the real world to lift extreme poverty to the poverty and the moderate level. So we have to focus on, in the future, this in-kind donation to cash to social business. So that is our changing point. And besides becoming a big fish, we have to agile and speedy fish.
Yeah. Very shortly, what we need to do better, and I would totally voice what Katie is saying, is we need to be better at expanding our ecosystem. I think we have colleagues from the UN here. If we really want to bring things to scale, we need to work with them. We need the academia. We need to come. Now you're sitting with a red panel here. There's nobody else. I think this is what we need to come out of our comfort zone and work better in partnerships. That's the negative. The positive is we are very proud of our national societies. There's, of course, Kızılay here. We have some others here, and also the volunteers. I think we have a huge sort of humanitarian wave there that we are benefiting from. And whatever we are doing, we couldn't do without them. So that's the pride.
It's a lovely way to finish it. Okay, yeah. That's been an illuminating discussion, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Dr. Kerem Kinnick, President of the Turkish Red Crescent, Katie Outfield from the ICRC, and Mette Peterson from the IFRC. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. Please. Dr. Kinnick. Thank you, Katie. I need to get my next card so I know what I'm saying next. Thank you. Sorry.